I am starting. Yep, hang on.
Nice.
Mhm. Yep. Oh, Dave's here. Lisa signed in yet? Not yet. Will. Don't see Will Powers here yet. Deb Conrad. Yep, you're here. Jennifer.
Don't see her.
We were just emailing each other, so I assume she'll be on. Kara is not going to be here. Matt Stinchcom, not here yet. Josh Cohen. Sean Casey. Stan Yarian, John Leone. Bill, I think I saw you on here. Yep. And I saw Laura on here. I have one name not available. I don't know who that is.
Yeah.
And Todd, one of our guests today.
And Jim, is it Yinger? Just joined.
And Jim, yes. Yep. Okay, I'm good, Dave. So
Okay, great. Did we send minutes out? Do we have minutes from the last meeting?
I did. I sent them out on Monday, I believe.
Okay, great. Any comments on the minutes before we jump in? Okay, we need a motion and a second to accept the minutes.
I so move.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Second, anyone?
I'll
I'll
second.
second them.
Thank you. Anyone opposed, please speak up. Make yourself known. Okay, the minutes are accepted. So the first thing we've got Jim Yanger and Todd Babosi. I'm sorry, Todd, if I mispronounced your name, who are joining us at 10:30 to talk about the CDRPC effort with regard to the greenhouse gas inventory, the regional greenhouse gas inventory, and climate action plan. So that's a great opportunity for us to get more in-depth understanding of what's coming and what kind of baseline we'll have to work with in our own inventory and action plan. Before that, we just wanted to go over a couple of things. One is the land use, just an update on the land use subcommittee. So we've met now a few times, and this is a group of us: Don, Barbara Huey, John Bradley, Jennifer Phillips, Deborah Conrad, Catherine Schneider, and Matt Mercier. And so what we're trying to do, just to remind everyone, is set ourselves up so we are able to manage and help to steer some of the land use components of the work that we expect to do next year. So we're familiarizing ourselves with tools, models, and potential collaborators that we might want to work with. We also have brainstormed a group of people that we would like to rely on as an advisory group in the county, a diverse group of people, which includes Soil and Water, NRCS, CCE, CLC, Young Farmers, Farm Credit East, Farm Bureau, Berkshire Ag Ventures, and then a number of farmers that we would like to recruit, different types of farmers, possibly a forester or two. So that group is not, we haven't convened that group yet, but the purpose of having that group would be to review the scope of work of whatever we are putting out to bid for a consultant to help us with this work on agriculture and land use, mainly forests, and also to review the work product and provide us preliminary feedback before we move forward with public comment on the work and help steer it. In addition to that, Jennifer is kind of heading up an effort to do a pilot analysis at Bard using one of the agricultural tools called Comet. And I can have her walk through that in a minute, or maybe right now, and then I'll talk about the forest, some of the forest questions separately. Jennifer, do you want to just give a quick overview of?
Yeah, I can't remember. I didn't do that last month's meeting. Maybe it was our subcommittee where I talked about it more, but basically I teach a course in the spring for graduate students at the Bard Center for Environmental Policy on climate and agroecology. And I'm going to use my grad students for an exercise that they'll use this model that's been developed by the USDA to estimate greenhouse gas emissions from field crops, essentially. I mean, the field crops part is the part that's most well developed within this model. So I need to think it through a little bit more, and I'll be working on exactly how we're going to do that project in January when I'm developing the course. But essentially, we'll be able to have a estimate of emissions from some typical farming systems in the county, modeling the primary crops that are being grown in the county now, and using typical soils that those crops are grown on, and then think through. We'll be able to model sort of standard conventional practices and then some alternative, more, greenhouse gas sensitive alternatives, so that at least at some level in our report back, we'll be able to give some idea of how much of a difference it might make if farmers were transitioning to some of these better practices like cover crop management and changes in their nutrient management, which is where our nitrous oxide is coming from. So we may or may not include livestock. The model can do some livestock work, but there may be a simpler way for us to just make some estimates there. And I'm curious to see what the regional committee is doing for the livestock emissions. And then I'm hoping that we might be able to do something with apples, because that is a big component of the county agriculture. But again, the model that we're using wasn't originally designed for orchard crops, and it has a component that you can do orchard crops. So I'm not sure if we'll be able to get that far. So anyway, this will be partly to help my students understand these processes and how to run this model, but also it's a good opportunity for me to provide some kind of input that will serve sort of as a pilot of a way to estimate emissions from ag for the county.
That's great. Thank you. Brenda.
Jennifer, I was just going to say, I believe that Claudia and Conrad Visbo have done some analysis of field crops for the Farmscape Ecology program and the farm operation down at Hawthorne Valley. So you might want to talk to them if it seems appropriate, and see if that's useful for you. I think they were trying to evaluate milk production and types of cover crops and that sort of thing. So I don't know if it's in your wheelhouse, but it might be helpful.
Yeah, I know Conrad and Claudia, and I can speak with them, and I'll run this by them. I mean, I think when they're analyzing those crops, they're looking at different things than greenhouse gas emissions from them, but they might have some good information on. I know one of my previous students actually modeled the system at Hawthorne Valley Farm using this model. So I have using the Comet model. So I'm very familiar with their whole 11-year rotation and all the crops that they grow there. But it could be useful to talk with Claudia and Conrad. So thanks for that.
And I just don't know how their analysis has evolved over time, because it has been such a long period of time. So
okay.
Thank you for thinking of them.
Yeah, it's always useful to talk to Conrad and Claudia, I find, but on a lot of levels. But this is great, Jennifer. And again, the idea here is to not do all of the analysis that will be the final product that we bring forward as part of our inventory for the county. It's really to a pilot project, as Jennifer said, which will allow us to understand how this model works, Comet, to see if that's what we really want to use. And the ultimate goal for the inventory and for the CAP is to create a baseline that's replicable. So we need to have some way of analyzing agricultural emissions that we can compare in 5 years. And ideally, it's a series of crops, farm types, and then practices within those farm types, growing those crops. And we are not in the business of trying to tell farmers what to grow or how to grow it. But what we are looking to do is lay out how those different practices can improve performance from a greenhouse gas standpoint and other aspects that can help farmers become more resilient, and point them in the direction of models or other farms that are using those practices in our county, in our area, and also funding sources. So that's kind of where we're going with this, a series of recommendations, a baseline that we can replicate in 5 years, and then encouraging collaboration and more innovative practices within the crop types that farmers want to grow. So that's what's happening on ag. I don't know if anyone has any other questions or comments on that. Thanks, Jennifer. That's exciting that you're getting students involved. And that will be really useful.
David, I just have one more question on ag. Is hay
Yeah.
considered a crop, or is it just, what is hay and how does that fall
It
in
is a
this
crop.
equation?
I mean, it is a crop.
It's the fourth largest land use in the county too, and it definitely has emissions associated with it.
Right, okay.
I mean, in Columbia County, a lot of it's alfalfa, which is interesting from a emissions perspective. So that, we'll be able to model that.
Thanks.
And this is not intended to be exhaustive. I mean, it doesn't cover certain farm types or crops that do exist here. It's just looking at kind of the most common to get us started in understanding how this might work. But hay is definitely up there. So on the forest side, interestingly, the New York Forest Carbon Assessment and the Applied Forest Research Institute, which is an organization that's been established recently, has set up a tool, which we've reached out to them to see how useful it might be. Looks like it might be an opportunity for us to collaborate, which its description is to maximize climate benefits that advance forest-based solutions across New York State. The map-based assessment provides a basis to identify and prioritize parcels and landowners that are best suited to different strategies and practices based on their recent, current, and projected future carbon stocks and land use changes. It also has an ability to do kind of a more granular, at least this is what I think from the literature, more granular analysis of the sort of the emissions and sinks coming from and going into the forested areas. So we've reached out to them to see if that's an opportunity to collaborate. It seems like it's New York State. It's tied together with the state climate plan. And it's also in collaboration with the Michigan State Forest Carbon Visualization Program. So we're looking at that as well. There are other tools that we'll be looking at, other potential collaborators want to just improve our understanding. In addition to that work, the Barbara Huey is looking at similar types of land use greenhouse gas inventory approaches that have been used at some similar scale to what we're at in other places, including the role of wetlands in climate mitigation, carbon mitigation, and sequestration. And we're keeping track of funding sources and we're noting other things that we're finding along the way. So that's what's happening with the land use subcommittee. We're continuing to meet monthly and continuing to kind of make progress at expanding our understanding. So when we're ready to hire someone or look to hire a consultant, we'll know exactly what we're looking for. All right. Thank you for that. Don, you want to give an update on the next item? NYSERDA grant.
Yep, sure. The CEC climate action, or excuse me, the NYSERDA grants. The last two that we have applied for, the installation of heat pumps at the county courthouse, which was a $300,000 grant. The contract's been signed with the installer. I don't know if the actual construction has begun yet, but that is imminent if it hasn't started already. And we did hear back that our last application, that we have a grant application for $412,500 due to our 4-star designation. That has been, our application has been approved. We still have to work through the specifics, coming up with a contract with NYSERDA. So we will not actually have those funds until that happens. So that's still, a few weeks process, but they did, it looks promising that we will be able to get the money through that grant too. But the CEC program funds have been exhausted. They are not taking in any more applications. We did get ours in just under the wire. The supervisors have decided to put all the efforts in that last grant to do some building energy efficiency upgrades to 401 State Street. They thought that would get us the most bang for the buck for that grant. Last month, there was a question about how much money has come in to the county altogether. And I reached out to Hallie, and she just gave me some preliminary numbers that the county, under version 3, so this is just since December 13th, 2023, I believe, the county and municipalities have received $2,662,500 through the NYSERDA CEC grant program. That doesn't include some grants that were acquired before December 13th, 2023. So I did some quick math, and of the 25 million out of that program, so that amounts to well over 10% of all the money that was put out throughout the entire state came to Columbia County or municipalities. And over $1 million of that has just come to the county government itself too. So, and in the meantime, that program is kind of winding down and it's transitioning into something else. So I put some effort into coming up with some kind of a new roadmap. So I'm going through all my notes, all my past, spreadsheets and everything, and trying to come up with we really haven't updated our climate smart communities or clean energy communities roadmaps in quite a while. So trying to put together a little document that kind of outlines, all of the actions we've completed under each of those programs. And so that's kind of what I've been working on the last few days.
That's a really amazing statistic, Don. 10% of the state's funding over the last couple of years. Actually, no, over the last year, right?
2020. Yeah. Yes. I think it was December 13th, 2023. I think they came up when we changed it. So yeah, it's just about a year.
Yeah. Well,
Am I
there's
right
a lot
there, Hallie? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yep, that's right. And I think more grants are still being announced, so that number may change.
Still a few that are rolling in too. So we'll get a final number eventually. Yep.
Amazing. And that work, the money's out there, but it's all up to people actually going and applying for it and doing the work of writing grants. And that's Don, and that's a lot of other people in our towns throughout the county doing that kind of quiet work that makes a big difference. So really owe everyone a debt of gratitude to doing that work and bring in those funds that are having an immediate impact. So that's very exciting. Thanks for the update. Any other questions for Don on clean energy, NYSERDA, grant funding? All right. I think the snow has everyone feeling pretty mellow today.
Just as one of the supervisors on the call, what I'd like to say is I think a lot of the success that Don reports to us is credit to this committee, its leadership and its commitment, because this is how we take information back to towns. And every town hasn't had to reinvent the wheel because this has been a source of sharing resources and information and how to. So I just would like to thank the commitment of this committee and the hard work of this committee specifically, and also our partners. We've had a number of community partners that have, I don't know how they find the time to be here on a regular basis, but thank each and every one of you for your hard work.
Yeah, absolutely. And particularly CDRPC for the support that they provide. So thank you. Okay, so my video seems to be of you all seems to be a little shady. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can
Okay.
hear it. Mine's a little in and out too. I don't know what the problem is, Dave, but yeah, the
Yeah.
video is a little wonky.
That's fine, as long as we can hear each other. If there's a problem, please let us know. So we're a few minutes early, but if Jim and Todd are on, I think we should shift over or we can get some updates if they're not on from later on in the agenda. But Jim and Todd, are you on yet?
We are.
Great. Well, welcome.
So,
And thanks
yeah, thanks
coming.
for having us. Thank you. And so it's nice to listen to your successes. So that's the program I've been managing for a while, and we have great staff helping you with Haley and Tara. And so I'm glad things are moving forward. You guys are a leader for sure in the capital region and in the state. So I'm not sure exactly the number, but I think you may have about 40% of the capital region grants too, if something in that ballpark. I think Haley mentioned 5 million the other day. And if you've got 2 of those, that's great work. So I want to just talk to you then about, well, a few things I can just mention, and Don, you kind of touched on it, unfortunately with not a lot of detail. As far as clean energy communities goes, the allocation of the 25 million in this phase has been claimed, but they're working up something else. We don't know what that is, and we don't know exactly when that will be, but sometime probably this coming year we will, and there'll hopefully be a new program with funding to be able to pursue it. Might look a little different. I think they're trying to shape something that will lead into the future after into 2027 and beyond. So we'll see where that goes. And we have been notified that we are going to be awarded the Climate Smart Community Outreach Services grant. Again, we did that for 2 years with DEC, and so we're just in that kind of contract phase right now. But so it's not finalized quite yet. I don't have the contract signed and sealed, but I've been notified that we will be hopefully having that service for you for another 3 years to help you with other kinds of things related to certification and your climate action planning. So specific to climate action planning, CDRPC got an EPA grant that we're about a little over a year into it from the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program. And that grant is focused on developing a climate action plan for the 8-county capital region. In fact, it actually wasn't 8 counties, but I modified the proposal to include you guys because it was actually the MSA definition, which doesn't include Columbia County and the capital districts or capital regions MSA. But we expanded it so that the footprint was coterminous with the state's definition of the capital region of the 8 counties in the capital region. So it matches up with our other programs with NYSERDA and DC. And the primary charge of this grant program is to develop a climate action plan and to develop an updated greenhouse gas inventory. And we've proposed to do the inventory down to the community level. And so each community would have its own information. We did that previously, as you probably are aware. And so there's a 2010 baseline inventory that we did a decade or so ago, and now we're going to be updating that, and we're well into that. So Jim Yanger from Climate Action Associates is going to talk about that and where we are with that, and just some of the process and what we're doing here, because it I think dovetails perfectly with the kind of things you're looking at doing, and we can maybe even learn some of the details of listening to your ag discussion, because we're in the midst now of that process. So the plan would be due later next year. And the plan essentially is a series of measures for mitigation. So it's a mitigation focused climate action plan. It's not an adaptation and resilience plan. But we are looking essentially at measures in each of the economic sectors that are like a best practices list for communities and counties to be looking at and considering, and then tying that to the inventory itself. And so that's where. So I'll stop there and turn it over to Jim unless someone has questions now, and he can kind of fill you in then on more details about where we are. Okay, Jim.
Sure. Yeah. Todd, thank you for the introduction. So I came here to this meeting. I was going to do a little slide deck of our regional plan and some of the progress and inventories and things, and I have that. But the initial conversation about the ag sector here has changed my thinking a little bit about this, because we're deep and heavy into doing our regional inventories and trying to understand where emissions are, and part of our value add for a regional planning process. We have to create value for this. And we know we have municipalities like yourselves and communities doing this work. One of the things that we realize is to create a collective voice for climate action in the region. We need to have an inventory that talks about everything: our transportation sector, our energy use, buildings, our process emissions, our energy power plants, our cement factories, our ag sector. We need something that is comprehensive, that explains to everyone where their role is. It also needs to be fairly granular, because one of the things that we've learned, and I've been doing this climate work for a long time, is that communities, like through Climate Smart Communities, will start over with their own inventory and go through a process of trying to figure out what the problem is before they act. And I think from a regional perspective, what we're trying to do is solve the inventory problem to as high level granularity as possible, so that we can provide it and figure out how to automate it, so that communities can start looking at the trends as opposed to spending time doing inventories. But having said that, we also know that it's difficult to do them at a regional level because of exactly the things that Jennifer and David were talking about. There's all sorts of additional granularity that's possible. A lot of the regional methods are not accurate enough. And so we need to, really, we want to partner with this group, specifically your inventory piece, to help us refine our own methods. I can go through what we have, but again, they're pretty coarse because they're county level and they don't have the granularity that you would like to get to. And in fact, in the next year, through the additional Climate Smart work, and as an extension to what we're doing with our regional inventories, we're already collaborating with a number of regional planning organizations, MPOs, and others to develop statewide protocol for greenhouse gas inventories down to a municipal level. So we have a good handle on utility information. We work at a policy level for that. We have a good handle on transportation data. We're working with, companies like Replica to figure out how to get much better granular data than we had before. But ag is not really there yet. We have our regional methods that use county census of livestock population, acreages of different kinds of crops. We have estimates for the amounts of fertilizer that's used in each of these, and we can create rough emission estimates. But what you're talking about with the COMET model and the forest carbon models, these are the next generation tools, and we're aware of these. And the idea is, if we incorporate the work you're doing, and in fact, we may just invite you to our statewide protocol group, because if the work that you're doing can provide better resolution models, what we want to do is figure out how to standardize that so that it can be incorporated and automated. So we would rely on your teams to help innovate some of the local level granularity. We can't do everything, so we have a big picture view. But if you, in this project you're doing, can help come up with for your communities something that can then be incorporated and automated, I think that's a great value add, because then through the dashboard that CDRPC has, we can automate this stuff and any community can make use of it and make it comparable. So, part of our big value add is trying to standardize and facilitate broad access. People look at me as the greenhouse gas inventory expert, and I have a lot of experience, but not in every sector. We're not experts in everything. So the work you're doing was fantastic to hear. So, anyway, and so I just wanted to start off with that, I'm very excited. We would love to partner with you on this and expect some form of invitation next year on some sort of protocol discussion group for ag. And again, I can show you in a few slides. We use for the ag sector, as you know, there's emissions from, within the agriculture component, we have livestock and manure, enteric fermentation, the kind of basic stuff. We have chemical fertilizer use, so nitrous oxide and manure, and there's different strategies you can use to reduce emissions. But we don't have everything there. And so this is where I think, again, you can help us produce better granularity. And the other thing that we have in that sector is now, as you're aware, the land use and sequestration component. So like if you look at traditional greenhouse gas inventories, ag and land use are kind of combined in a big bucket, but I view them as quite separate because managing ag land is one activity, but managing natural lands is a whole different ball game. And so we know that, we have the standard IPCC methods. We have the state inventory methods. If you are aware of the state's greenhouse gas inventory, you can download their methods. And they have a way to observe the amount of forest you have. They have emission factors for forest, remaining forest, and they sequester. And so Columbia County, I think, Don, you said in your email, you have 50% forested. We know that in the state inventory that forest land sequesters about 25% of our gross emissions, so from energy and everything. So it's a significant thing. So for Columbia County, it's going to be pretty substantial compared to your emissions. But again, it's pretty rough. And I think the next generation is what you're talking about, building out a more granular land use inventory, developing carbon stock models that are dynamic so that, alongside an emission inventory for your energy-based or ag-based emissions, and we know, say, you're, 500,000 tons, we can put side by side your land uses and your carbon stock that you're holding, almost like a public resource, like a water resource. Like we have carbon stock on our lands, and we want to protect them. And the way to do that is to have an inventory of them, so you can also watch them over time. So, and these again are going to go and help solve the problems of trying to. And we saw this in our ag working group. It's a difficult sector because you have stress to put renewable generation, for example, through solar or using ag lands for something. But at the same time, those can also harm your carbon inventories and your carbon stock. You don't want to take forests out for that. There's clearly some balance that's needed. So these more granular tools, I think, will help solve that, to help climate smart renewable generation on your lands, to make sure, we're using, agrivoltaics or things that are co-locating with the land use that doesn't harm your sequestration. It generates energy, but also preserves your sequestration. We're not there yet in terms of our ability at a regional level to produce an intel necessary for that. We have in our regional plant the same kinds of strategies that you've just talked about. Like for ag, we have cover crops. We heard that just like from you folks. We hear these things and we've listed them, but we don't really have a perfect way to quantify, say, the emission benefits from cover cropping. If we remove a certain amount of nitrogen fertilizer because of cover cropping, or we move to I guess, and this is what I heard, like manure instead of chemical fertilizer, yes, there should be a benefit. We don't have the ability to perfectly quantify it. We would love to work with you to develop those tools because that would help us as well. So anyway, that was sort of an aside. I'm happy to give some slides about our regional numbers and some of the changes that we've had. How many of you went to the CDRPC meeting? Because I gave this presentation. I know, Don, you were probably there. Was anyone else there? Just want to know if any of the numbers I'm showing would be new to people.
Don
Jim's
gave us-
referencing Hudson Valley Community College, our planning and zoning conference.
Yeah, I think there were like three of us on the committee that went to that. Tom
Okay.
Pato, Steve, who was not here today, and me, and I'm not sure if anybody else went to it. That was it.
And Don gave us a quick update last month on that as well. And I think it would be useful, very useful to get your update of that. But before we do, while we're on this kind of side topic or on ag and natural lands, I mean, thank you, first of all, for inviting us to participate and your openness to collaborate. I mean, that's really what this is all about. We specifically, in our application for the grant money for the CAP, we specifically carved out a little bit for this work to robustify the inventory, on ag and land use. And so that's what we're planning on. And the county was all in support of that. So that if we get the grant, that's what we're going to do. And so the question we can have more offline, I think, is, how do we actually do that? It's not a lot of money, but we're going to do what we've described we're doing now. And then with that grant money, try to hire someone. But we don't want to, we want to do this in a way that's as collaborative and integrated into what you're doing as possible. Try to leverage resources together. So I think that's for a follow-up conversation. But the question I had is timing. When does your inventory get finished, completed, and how much time do we actually have to incorporate new, more innovative models in these areas?
Well, so I would say that we are in the process right now of we have county level inventories with county level resolution at this point, and we are in the process of breaking them down into municipal levels with different strategies that we have. And that work is underway. So we're aiming to have that done in January or probably in January. So we would have a draft inventory for every community for 2022. But that doesn't mean that the innovation stops. So what we're doing is we want to get something out the door, but there is going to be placeholders in our protocol for changes and improvements. And we'll probably be doing it over the course of the following year. And the idea is we want to publish, and this is very specific. So we want to publish a document called the Community Greenhouse Gas Inventory Protocol, New York State Community Inventory Protocol. There is a version of this already. It's called the 2015 Community Greenhouse Gas Inventory Guidance. You can find it on DEC's website. And it talks about the protocol for each of the sectors. I'm aware of it because I facilitated that process like 8 years ago. So I coordinated something similar. And our goal is to update that. So what we would like is, in the ag sector, we're going to review the data sources and models that are available. And right now, they're pretty coarse, but we would like to make recommendations for the most scalable and applicable model that can be standardized at a state level so that it could be automated. We would love your help writing that. So you could be part of the working group to help author that particular chapter in the guide, which would be a component of whatever research you're doing. And we're just making it up. So we did this. We have collaborators from, I said, across the state interested in this. And we don't have a lot in your sector. We have a lot of interest in ag. So there's a lot of experts, but I haven't yet heard such a coordinated view that you have presented today about really applying models and getting a granular, view of emissions that you can track over time. So anyway, as we move forward, we should talk about that, because we would love to have you in that and help us draft this. If you're bringing on experts, and it sounds like you have experts to help do it, students and other things. So it really is collaborative. We do not have a grant for this. There isn't a specific contract to do it. What we're doing is we have, and as Todd mentioned, a lot of organizations have climate smart communities support funds. So we know that through that, we're trying to produce something valuable. And one of the things that we're thinking about is this protocol in the inventory. So we're incorporating it into some existing work, but we don't have an explicit fund for this protocol, but we don't need it. I think we can just collaborate and probably make something valuable.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how we're approaching it, because we're all volunteers, including Jennifer. We will have some limited grant funding, but that sounds great. Brenda, you want to say something?
I had a question for Jim. When you talk about scalable, do you mean a model that can be used statewide, or do you mean something that can be used in smaller, in various shapes and sized communities?
Yeah, I mean the latter. So I mean
Okay.
something that's scalable down to a local granular level.
Okay.
So for example, let's say you apply the COMET model, or you find data sources, remote sensing sources for land uses that are creating a significant granularity for Columbia County, and you can break things down. we would want to see if that's something that could just be applied statewide. And so whether or not we did it, at least communities that are going through the same process would have, would be pointed to a set of tools and resources that, in fact, our group could call a standard. So to help standardize it. So yeah, when I say scalable, we want granularity, right? And that's what we're trying to accomplish. And like we have it with other sources, like our utility database. We have meter level aggregations from utilities specific to exact communities. So we have a very good accounting of energy use, and that's scalable. It's a statewide database. So that's what we're trying to accomplish. Because, as I said before, ultimately, if communities doing climate smart work can go to some sort of dashboard and get their emissions, or at least if that's not available, go to have their own team or interns go to a resource where they can download the protocol and then do it and know it's consistent and has been vetted by experts like yourselves, they'll have more confidence in it. So that's what we're trying to achieve.
Great. I have another question for you, Jim, but I want to make sure that people have a chance to ask questions. So don't be shy if you do have any. So you talked a bunch about ag, and that's obviously top of mind. You mentioned working lands. You mentioned forests being a repository of carbon. The one question that we have kind of looking out at our forested lands and experiencing them kind of on a day-to-day basis is the degradation of our forest lands. It's not that this is a stock that's dynamic, and with all of the pressures, climate related and otherwise, deer, we are concerned about not just, protecting what's there, but the need to actually help these forests adapt and to help them become more biodiverse, more resilient. And so, I mean, this brings in a whole bunch of policy questions around how 480A works and how the Regenerate New York works and all of these other programs that have popped up, and if they're truly serving these purposes or they're just basically serving extractive purposes. We're not anti-extraction by any means. We all use wood. But the point is, are you getting into policy questions at all on these fronts, or are you just looking at Jim, maybe you're just looking at the inventory and the models for looking at what carbon stocks are out there? But is the broader effort, Todd, looking at policy questions as well? I assume it is.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, Todd. Did you have something?
No, that's it. That's part of it's, hand in hand with the measures we're developing as part of the plan. So they're feeding off of each other. And just to note one thing, Jim's mentioned a dashboard. That's part of what we're developing. We have somewhat of a working model, but that's going to be expanded out on CDRPC's website now. But we're developing this dashboard where any community can look up their inventory, can compare it to the last inventory, and hopefully we'll continue to be able to do that over time and add new information over time. So that's that's not to say you won't want to have your own location where you're putting your information out, but this is going to be a regional resource for everybody.
Great. And what is your take on the New York Forest Carbon Assessment, the CAFRE work, that effort? Are you collaborating with them? That's, CAFRE and ESF, I guess, working together. Are you working with that approach? Is that something that's actually even an ongoing kind of effort, or has it stalled out? I mean, is that a good solution for us? I mean, is that a piece of this, do you think?
Are you talking about their carbon stock component of that?
Yeah, the carbon stock component, and also the tool that they're developing to help prioritize lands for conservation and perhaps enhancement. Yeah,
so we're interested in that model. I mean, it's part of our, I think, improvement plan for next year to engage that. I see it as a good step for starting a carbon stock inventory. I'm not sure about the policy components of it. I haven't evaluated it to that extent, but I think I kind of see it as a next generation approach for beginning your carbon stock inventories at as much granularity as we can muster. So I think it's fairly nascent. I've just been aware of it. I wasn't part of their, working group, and but we intend to engage it, and we'll see. I mean, do you have an opinion yourselves? It sounds like you started with it, or you've downloaded, or have.
No, we don't. I don't have an opinion yet. I'm excited with what it seems to present. It's, and we've reached out to them, and hopefully we'll have some conversations around the potential collaboration with that model. We'll look at others as well. I think eClay has some modeling as well, and so there are other things. Do you know of any? One of the things that we're trying to figure out is, at the scale, regionally or county-wide, do you know of any efforts in New York State or anywhere that are trying to really get to this granular level of ag and land use change?
I don't know, Todd, do you have an opinion? I mean, some of the remote sensing and other things. I mean, we have the National Land Cover Database, which isn't very accurate, but in New York, Todd, do you have any opinions on the most recent land cover databases? Because the one we have is pretty coarse, and I think that's something that needs to be improved.
Yeah, I don't, to the extent that we haven't started to evaluate that. The National Land Cover data comes these days processed, so it's not just the raw imagery, but it's land cover classes that an organization does and publishes regularly. So it's just the ease of access makes that a kind of go-to source, and it's been around for a long time too, if you want to compare change over time. But there are higher resolution imagery products out there, but they probably, as far as we'd have to do more research. And Don, I don't know if you've looked at this at all in the GIS world, but you'd probably have to do the land classifications yourself. And I've been through that back in the day when I was doing GIS stuff, and it's a kind of involved process in and of itself. And there's not, just my experience, even with working Landsat data with raw imagery, is it's not as clear cut as you might think, because the spectral signals are not necessarily unique, to put it simply, right? Basically near infrared imagery senses the presence or absence of chlorophyll, and that's a key indicator of how to do that. But it also gets confused then with things like a farm field that's been recently plowed and a parking lot because there's no carbon on either of them, and those kind of things. So it's not so that but so we would need to look into that further. I'm sure there's probably work out there, because the technologies, I mean, the state has imagery with near infrared that's, I think, down to 1 foot or 2 feet that you can get access to. So, but then it gets the more granular, the more confusion starts to happen with things. So you have lots of classes. We have to figure out what they actually are.
Yeah, and David, I would say, going back to your point about, are we just doing an inventory or is it policy specific? I would say that, the inventory work is designed to help you evaluate policies and see changes. And so it's only, that's the point of it. It's not just an academic exercise. So for example, like you were talking about, so you have natural lands and you have forests and you see some degradation. So then the question is the inventory, is it possible to track that degradation? So if we have, for example, remote sensing, and we classify your land uses into 5 types or 100 types, and each of those types would have an above canopy carbon stock, a below canopy, based on different land uses, we can do an inventory carbon stock. Would remote sensing be possible to detect, degradation, or would there be a different other, approach or observation approach that might be done on the ground to detect it? And that would indicate a decline, for example. Perhaps there is a projection of a decline of carbon stock because of degradation. Those would be important policy tools. So if you're projecting, you're not protecting your forest and you see a decline through degradation, you could calculate what the loss of your sequestration would be. But we need the tools to do that. So the inventory has to be resolved, and you have to have the model so that you can, evaluate the changes. So like these conversations, my mind always goes to, when I hear policy goals, is the model going to resolve it and support it? And that's what's important, so that it's not just we're doing something because we feel good about it, but we don't really know if it makes sense, or it could be counterproductive to our goals, like if we're not smart about things. I think, if we can find better granular data, some of this will happen. I mean, I think we've talked about this. I would love to see in the future, as we start looking at land use tools, so communities have planning and zoning. You know, we have the seeker, you know, you have environmental impacts. And so, like, if someone wants to come in and develop 100 acres, you know, at some point, the conversation may be, okay, in your application, you have to tell us what your carbon stock is. How many tons of carbon stock is on that piece of land that you're developing? And then after you're going to develop, tell us what the carbon stock is going to be after that. And then you have a conversation to say, you know, your development is going to make an impact on this natural resource called carbon stock that we have. Are there policy tools there where, you know, there could be planning and zoning tools in place to help preserve it as a result of development or expand it somewhere else? So I would love to see the level of granularity go down to that kind of decision. Because right now we talk about water resources. You might say, okay, you can't harm wetlands. You know, you got to preserve green space at 20%. But it can be a little bit more, I think, intelligent, particularly like if you have a solar developer, someone wants to take out forests. Okay, man, they would really have to come in and demonstrate a pretty significant benefit of, you know, energy and maybe a plan to reforest elsewhere in order to justify something like that. And, you know, now I think like in solar, there isn't really that level of smartness. I think there's some areas that are just taking down forests and others that aren't, but we could get better.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I kind of see. Like carbon stock is like if you had a town and you say, okay, we have 1.5 million tons of carbon in our biosphere, in our lands. That's an important thing. Track that over time. You could set goals like we do emission reduction goals. You know, we do emission reduction goals where we want to reduce emissions every year. We could set goals to increase our inventory of carbon stock and say, you know, we're at 1.5 million tons in our forests, and what can we do to make it 1.6, 1.7? So the analogy of managing carbon stock is very similar to managing emissions and the inventory if you have the tools and you can incorporate it in your decision making.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what
Yeah.
I see kind of long term. We could go that route, but I don't know.
I wanted to just chime in on that, Jim, because the other thing it goes hand in hand with, just to put this out there, maybe I'm stating the obvious, but it also goes hand in hand with the idea of smart growth and where you're actually going to target your growth. Because it's one thing to be saying, well, we're going to try to enhance our carbon stock, but their population's growing, people need places to live, businesses need locations. And so it forces you to think through then where are the concept of centers and green spaces. Where are our areas where we can have our hamlets, our villages, where we can grow a village out of a hamlet versus just have sprawling subdivisions and that kind of thing. So it forces the thinking about that as well. And that's a topic we want to get into after the CCAP. We're calling it CPAC. It's a Comprehensive Climate Action Plan is the EPA name for what we're working on. Once that's done next year, we've still got 2 more years to be working through with some of their funding, how we're going to implement this and what else we want to look at. And looking at carbon stock and places for development, looking at essentially regional smart growth plans is one of the things we're interested in.
Yeah, that's great. That's really fascinating and illuminating. I mean, there's also underutilized lands that are slowly, you know, like farmland that's fallow, and there's quite a bit of that. And you know, we can just associate that as, oh, it's becoming a woody kind of, it's converting back to forest. But you know, what type of incentives, resources are available out there to actually make that a higher value forest if it's not going to be used for ag? A lot of questions around that. It's really fascinating. Jennifer, you had a comment?
Yeah, just Jim, I'm excited to hear that you guys are so interested in increasing the, you know, usefulness of the ag emissions assessments. And I have worked with COMET for a number of years, but primarily in the context of the graduate course that I teach. And my area of expertise is emissions from ag and soil carbon sequestration. But I'd love to have a conversation with you offline. And at a minimum, the way I design this exercise in my course could be influenced maybe by what you guys want out of it, because I think it could be useful for you to have sort of a little trial run at a county level on one possible way of using that model. So let's have a conversation offline. I'd love to contribute to that work.
Fantastic. I see you said that you teach at Bard College. Do you work with Cale? Does Cale Roberts
Yes. He teaches in our program at the Bard Center for Environmental Policy.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I work with Cale. I mean, I not everyone knows it, but I was a technical director of ICLEI for almost 10 years.
Oh, okay.
Back in the 2000s. So Cale and his team is doing great stuff now. So I was one of
Very
the early.
cool. Yeah, he
early
was one of
ones
our
in
grad
that.
students from about 10 years ago, and one of our students that just graduated last year is now working at ICLEI as well. So
Fantastic.
Right.
I can show a couple of slides if you have time. Otherwise, this has been helpful discussion anyway. So I don't know how much time you have. What we could present is there's been some emission changes and some reasons why emissions have gone down and some macro level things, and some other slides that may be of interest. But I'll leave it to you guys. We could, because I know we want to have some conversation, Todd, here about what's the best strategy to more formally engage the municipalities in the county, because I know we want to do this in all of our counties, and how to get feedback, not only on our inventory products that we've been doing here, but also our strategies and what's the best way to do it. So maybe we should just facilitate that discussion here.
Yeah, and let me just note then what kind of some of our thinking about engagement and maybe just a quick review of what we've been doing for the past year. So the way we have approached the engagement on this over an 8-county area was to look at regional players that had a certain kind of topic area in which they had the primary jurisdiction. So when we looked at the transportation sector, for example, we engaged with the MPO, with the Capital Region Transportation Council. They're developing an update to their transportation plan for the region. Granted, the way that some of these regional areas are defined, they don't include your county as of right now, though I just had a meeting with them this past week, and they are slowly trying to branch out into surrounding areas with different programs. But nonetheless, that's the way that we're doing it. And there's the transit authority that's CDTA that also runs the bus systems, and we engage with them, and we approach it as we're a container for what's going on in the region rather than coming up with a bunch of new things to kind of put at people. Our philosophy was, let's hear what everyone's doing and start to gather that together and document that, because they're the experts in their areas. We engaged with the Clean Energy Hub and the Affordable Housing Partnership and talked to them about some of the approaches they have with buildings. And we've met with a variety of different groups in each of those sectors at that kind of broader level to develop measures in waste and in ag. And we're reaching out to businesses. That's not as easy as you might think in terms of getting people on calls to engage, but we're working through that. But nonetheless, now we're approaching the phase in which we want to have a draft community level inventory coming up in the beginning of this next year, and have those measures as a kind of menu, as I said earlier, best practices, and then take them out to the communities to be able to respond to. We don't expect at this stage, right in the very beginning, it would be much more than an exposure to the measures. And if communities want to, for example, pick and choose certain measures that they want to work on, they can. If communities want to start to engage in a more methodical climate action plan at the local level, we're now the intention is providing that inventory already made for you, and then being able to use the measures that we have to be able to kind of pick and choose what might work for you. And you may have your other things that aren't on there, but we're trying to get the most standard kind of best practices in there. And because we have these series of relationships through our clean energy community and climate smart community, and we have Haley, we have Tara, we have Josh Franoff, we have 3 people in the capital region that are doing this. We want to just keep capitalizing off of that process to do it. So, and we would, in your county, for example, the communities have sustainability committees. You meet monthly, and just part of it would be an engagement around that topic, at least for a meeting or 2 in the beginning, and then helping you follow through over time to start to implement at the local level what you might be interested in. But in order to introduce that, we have a municipal advisory group that's been meeting at the regional level, and Don has participated on that. And recently, the feedback we were getting was it might be a good idea to start at a county level and invite the communities in the county to come together. And you guys are really the lead model for that in the region because of the way you interface at the county level with your communities, which is great. We'd love to be able. Wish we had for every county a group like this we could just go to, but it's not. It's a variegated landscape out there of participation, and so the idea would be we would do a broad presentation to the municipalities that were invited into the county, and then invite you to reach out to us for individual meetings at the community level. That's kind of broadly what we were thinking and hoping to do. So we could maybe work with you to schedule something where you invite the municipalities sometime next year, early next year, to be able for us to do a broad presentation, and then that invite to reach out to us individually.
That sounds great. We would very much like to participate. I know not going to speak for Jennifer, but it's very exciting that you're trying to open the discussion around these key questions of land use and ag. And we would love to participate in that regard or in other regards. So please keep us. This is a good forum to kind of have that information flow back to the towns as well, into the community. So, it's a good opportunity to kind of one-stop shop, and then we can pass information back down at the more local level too.
So how should we work with you work through Don to be able to try to set up something when we're ready? So, maybe it would be in February, so just thinking through that, is that how do you advise we set that up?
Specifically on the ag and forest and natural lands, or more broadly on reviewing the work that you've done?
More broadly, the ag and that you can work on the side in whatever way you need to engage with Jim and we'll move forward with that as needed. It's we can have a subcommittee, we can engage it with the others. That is kind of an aside thing, but this is more just this one presentation that we'd like to do in the early part of next year.
Yeah, I think we should schedule it for one of our meetings. If February works, we should do it in February, and then we can do a presentation at the monthly meeting. That would be the best because it's scheduled. So I don't know how much time you need, and that's a question. If it's more than an hour, it might be difficult. We could probably do an hour and a half and get our other business done in a half hour. But if you need more time, we can split it over 2 meetings, or we could look for a separate time. But this is a standing meeting where this group gets together, and we can then take that information and pass it back into our communities and look to solicit feedback for you.
All right, that's perfect. Go ahead.
David, I think the timing for this is good because a lot of communities, as well as a number of supervisors, are thinking about what is the future of this now that the CEC funding has sunset. So I think it's important to understand that this is just the first phase is ending and another chapter is opening, and that these are the things that we need to look at going forward.
Mm-hmm.
But many communities were very tied to the funding opportunities. Now we need to shift to other kinds of activities.
Yeah.
And the thing is that support will be there. Even we don't know exactly what NYSERDA is going to come up with, but with the Climate Smart Community Support Services that we're expecting to launch this coming year and for 3 more years, we're going to have the outreach team, Haley and Tara and Josh. And I don't know if you guys have met Josh, we assign everyone to different counties. So Haley and Tara down in your neck of the woods, but they're there then to help you with, let's say a community wants to look at the measures we've developed and wants to maybe go through developing your own climate action plan, or wants to just pick and choose some of the measures to work on. They're there to help you with that then through this other grant program through DEC. So we do have the resource. We don't come with the DEC program with a bag of money, but we come with technical support.
Yeah, the timing is great for us too because of this grant application we have. Hopefully, we'll hear in January, and the funding may be released for our own climate action planning process in March, April, May. So the timing's great to just enhance our understanding of this process in terms of what you've done and how you've approached it. That's going to help us a lot. And then also on the funding side, a lot of the NYSERDA money was for the built environment, and that needs to continue. And for the energy sector, transport sector, that all needs to continue and ramp up. But the area that's been kind of underinvested in is ag and land use, and that's changing. I mean, we've got the USDA Climate Smart Commodities grants. We've got a lot of money going into agroforestry and other efforts. So I think if we are able to delineate what, through the work that Jim and others are doing, at a more granular level, what the value of these land use changes are in terms of carbon, we'll be in a good position to qualify and help communities and individuals and businesses qualify in our community for those grant programs. Just a little different. Those will be more difficult, like heat pumps and electric vehicles are on some level commodity switches and they're easier. So this whole area is just more complicated because it's something that hasn't really been done. So I feel like this collaboration could really help us, be at the forefront of helping people, qualify for some of that funding and the technical assistance needed. So that's exciting. I think February, we should aim for February. We should aim for, you tell us if that's not appropriate, but that we'll just go with that understanding until we hear otherwise. And do you think an hour or an hour and a half is sufficient time? Do you think we should split this over two meetings, February and March?
Well, Jim, I'll defer to you if you think we'll be ready to go by February. And I think an hour to an hour and a half is fine. I don't think we need 2 meetings for this because we're not going to get into the granularity that we will with each individual community then who wants to then reach out to us and talk about their specific community. But Jim, I think that a half an hour presentation or 45 minutes then with a dedicated balance of the meeting for discussion is probably adequate. We would go through each of the measures at a high level. And it may be that we want to leave the meeting then, Todd, with a survey product or something for which then people can go in and provide their feedback online or some other means. We should talk about that so that, because normally we have a spreadsheet that we use. It's a little clunky for people to view, but maybe we can think about a link that we can set up to get we'll record the feedback during the meeting, but, maybe we can think about another way. Yeah. And the other thing just want to throw out there, one of the things we're starting to develop right now that would be what we would bring out to the communities individually with meetings about is a way to show these measures that we're developing and kind of a tool that makes it easy to kind of look at them in each sector and select out ones you might be interested in and have some kind of an output of that each community could have to work from. So we're in the process of just starting to develop a tool like that because our master spreadsheet that Jim's managing with all of the measures is a little too wonky for just to hand off the communities, but so we're trying to come up with something a little simpler to engage.
Okay, great. A couple comments or questions. Thomas, then Don.
Yes, I really appreciate this conversation and hearing about how we're going to analyze carbon emissions vis-a-vis land use and agriculture. But there's 2 things I haven't heard, and maybe you have addressed them or considering it. But one is the soil type mapping, which is extensive and literally granular, has existed before GIS. And there's substantial acreage in Columbia County that's more shale than soil. So how is that playing into your analysis? And the second is what is the projections for climate change, particularly with hydrotopography? Columbia County is a hilly place with a lot of water coursing going through it. In the last year, we've had 3 1,000-year storms in the globe, and those are 14 inches typically of rain in a very short amount of time. So how are you programming the projections for climate change?
Okay, so I think that there were two questions in there. One is about soil types, and so you have a lot of shale, and I guess, to be honest, I don't really have a perfect answer. We look at land use from what's growing on the land types. Now, I assume shale would coexist with some other type of specific biome that is suited for it, and then maybe that, if we have granularity in our model, we can create a resolution in our carbon stock to support that. If there is a specific research about the carbon sequestration by soil type specifically, that would be independent of the biome there, we would love to incorporate it. And that would be something, Jennifer, we should talk about. If there's a way to figure that in this model, that would be great. But yeah, I haven't really, you've got a really granular set of data, and that is important. And it will probably give us some intelligence to refine the land use model, if there is some way to correlate the soil type with what the canopies are there. So I wish I had a better answer for you on this.
I'll just chime in on that. Comet does use the USDA soils database as the basis. So when you're modeling it, it knows exactly what soils there, using the Web Soil Survey database. So from the ag perspective, that is definitely taken into consideration, and it's computing change in soil carbon. So that number comes out of that, but that's just for
Perfect.
the ag component.
Yeah,
But it has in there
anecdotally, that there are farmers in Columbia County that are harvesting the shale. So you have to bring that into the picture.
Right.
And then the second question was projections of climate change and hydrology.
Yes. Okay. So I'm a former climate scientist. In my original days, I was a climate scientist at Princeton, my first job. So I would say that currently we are relying on the projections that New York State is putting out as our talking points for the increased extreme events that we expect to happen. I know from having worked as a scientist that we were expecting it. And so we're out on the mitigation side looking at solutions. So we rely on data from, the state to show us what the drivers of action are, the extreme events, essentially, like you just talked about. But we don't measure them or develop data for that. So what you've just talked about is kind of confirming what the talking points that we already have, is that climate change is going to increase extreme events and flooding, high frequency precipitation, this kind of thing. So I guess I will say we don't necessarily try to keep track of it. We want the best information possible for our outreach work.
Let me chime in with that too, and just say, because as Jim just mentioned, and I noted earlier, the funding we're getting for this climate action plan is mitigation based. It's through the AIR group, essentially. So even though adaptation and resilience is critical as well, it's really kind of the two pieces, as you know, of looking at climate change. It's what can we do to stop making it worse, but then what can we do to respond to what's happening? We did through this past year, through the CSC contract, help you to start to develop some baseline discussions around the issues with adaptation and resilience. As you know, in the county and municipalities did plans that were funded through that program through us. But what I would maybe say, and I'm not sure what your thinking is about your approach. You've got funding and you're going to be hiring a consultant to do your climate action plan. But obviously you don't want to pay a consultant to do the things that we may already be doing in our plan. And you may want to tailor what you're asking them around based on what you're going to get from us that you otherwise might have asked for, because if we weren't doing what we're doing, including a new inventory and including, the measures, those kind of things, you may get a lot of that from us. But some people that approach, and I don't know what your approach is to a climate action plan, may also be looking at adaptation resilience based issues. So that may be a place you want to delve into in more detail through your consultant in your climate action plan, because we're not touching on that. So just throwing that idea of how to, when you're thinking through what you're going to put your RFP together on and ask for, couch it around what you may already be getting from us, and don't ask for that again, but ask for other things that complement.
Yeah, that's really important that we do that. So that's why having this presentation in February will be very timely and helpful for us to help shape out what we asked for. We did recently do, as you mentioned, with your support, a countywide and some more local action or resilience plans, adaptation and resilience plans, that those need to be updated. And Thomas, to your point, these extreme events need to be addressed in terms of how we adapt to them and how we create more resilient infrastructure. A lot of the land use work that we're talking about will also help, with increased, forested lands and protecting our forested lands, protecting riparian zones that can absorb more of this water, making sure that wetlands are also protected and such. So important questions. But I think, Todd, you're right. And it's important for us all to remember, we're going to get a lot from this CDRPC effort. Let's make sure we really understand what we're getting and try to dovetail our work with that so that we don't reinvent the wheel. I see a lot of that at the local level. It feels like every town wants to do its own kind of inventory, its own action plan. And then the question is, what have we actually done? Are the sum of the parts greater than the actual parts? I'm not sure. So anyway, thanks for that. Brenda or Don, sorry, Don was first.
Okay, just a couple of things regarding the granularity of the data. The soils has a lot of info in it. You can look up like organic content of different soil types. So I think that's a great resource, and we are combining that with all the other stuff we're finding. And the NLC data, that's really that's where almost everything starts. When you're looking at other land cover data sets, like the U.S. Forest Service puts out different types of tree cover data. But what I found, it almost always starts with NLC data. So I haven't really found anything that's more, has a higher resolution, much more higher resolution than that. I have, for some towns in Columbia County and other towns outside Columbia County, I've gone through and done a much more detailed land cover data set when I'm doing some kind of these models. I've actually digitized all the forests in a town or all the farm fields in the town. Doing that for a county is a much different. that's a different ball game altogether. But it can be done. But I don't think we're going to be able to do that for Columbia County. So just putting that out there. And my question about the meeting, a group meeting, I was wondering if we might want to broaden who we invite to that meeting in February. We're kind of speaking to each other all the time here. So there are some other, I have a pretty comprehensive list of other folks that are in the Climate Smart Communities program. They aren't necessarily members of this group, but we do have, many other groups in the county. So we may want to broaden our audience for those, for one or two next meetings.
Yeah, definitely. And promote it.
If you want to do that, we can
make sure we promote it, make sure people know that it's what's being presented. So there'll be a lot of interest from the towns, I'm sure. That's a good point, Don. Brenda?
That's one of the things I was going to mention. I also would like to make sure that we have other supervisors from the home committee that are available for this presentation. But the other thing is, I just wanted to mention that the county is completing its 5-year update for its hazard mitigation plan. And the most significant changes to the plan are associated with climate change and mitigation for climate change. So that will be a useful tool. I think it's going to committee in January, maybe February, so that it's not as granular as what you're talking about, but it has started to address some of these issues. And I think 18 of the 19 towns in Columbia County are participating in this. So it's fairly widespread in terms of the data that was collected. And the engineering firm was Ty and Bond that's working on that. So I don't know if you've worked with them previously, but we should have a document after the first of the year.
So I wonder if they, within their analysis, they must have incorporated models of like the extreme rainfall events to identify the vulnerability, vulnerabilities? Was there a good amount of granularity in the analysis for, modeling out the projected, extreme rainfall events? If
know
climate
that
change was incorporated there, I would imagine that's what they would have done.
Yeah, and I know that we're involved in that in our town because we have a disproportionately high number of steep slopes in our town. And a lot of our mitigation is around that, unstable slopes, loss of trees, that sort of thing. And the other thing I think that we were concerned about in terms of the degradation of forests and also fallow farmlands are invasive species. That was something that was talked about quite a bit as well. So it's hard for forests to regenerate with the competition from the invasive species. But I'll make sure that we get a copy of that when it's available.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. Well, I think we have a plan, and the plan is to follow up in February. Please share, Todd and Jim, if you can share any documents before that meeting, that would be great. The sooner we have it, the sooner we can distribute it to folks, and we'll do our best to recruit people to join the meeting and advertise it. Make sure that the others that are not on this task force, and there are many other people, including supervisors, who will be interested in that, are attending. So it's worth everyone's while, and we can get the biggest bang for our time, our buck. And we'll follow up. Jim, we'll follow up. We'll just keep an open channel in terms of what we're learning and our preliminary understanding of ag and forests and how these models might work for our inventory. And then hopefully we can, continue to collaborate there and create something that can be used more broadly.
That sounds great. So just to confirm, it's the first Thursday in February. Is that correct?
First Thursday. Yep. First Thursday in February, 10 a.m.
Okay. So Don, will you be sending out an invite for us then? Okay.
Okay. Any other last comments or questions for Jim and Todd? Great. Well, we really appreciate your time and all of the work you're doing and your collaborative spirit. So thank you. And we look forward to working with you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Likewise. Yep.
All right. I'm signing off.
Okay. Well, we've got just a few other kind of minor updates, and then I guess the only Christina to see Clean Energy Hub. Do we have any updates on what's going on with the Clean Energy Hub? If you're on, Christina.
I am on.
Great.
Hi.
Hi.
Yes, we are. We've set a date for a energy literacy workshop. We're working on a different name, but that's basically the gist of it. So we're going to be holding the first of those in the county in Volusia on February 1st, a Saturday at 10 a.m. And we would hope that as many towns as want to can participate. We do have a planning meeting tomorrow at 1 p.m. If anyone is interested and not currently on that call, please reach out to me. I can put my email in the chat, and we can work on planning that and some future events from there. I think we're looking at another one in Hillsdale in June, and we will be having one in Hudson sometime probably in between.
Great. Thank you.
Christina, it's 1 p.m. or 2 p.m.?
1 p.m. I had to change it. I think I sent an email with a calendar invite. We have an event at 3, so I couldn't have a meeting end at 3. But yeah, 1 p.m. So sorry if that didn't get to you.
All right. Thanks, Chris. Thank you. Any other updates from the towns? I also want to just touch base on the next meeting. It's on December 2nd, which is a week where I know I'm not around that week. So just wondering what people's thoughts are on either rescheduling the meeting in January. I'm sorry, I said December, didn't I?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that's confusing. The January 2nd is the Thursday of that New Year's week, and I'm anticipating low attendance and wondering what people's thoughts are in terms of meeting in January. Should we try for the second Thursday of the month instead?
Sounds good.
Okay. Well, we'll just make that adjustment. We'll send that out now so people can get that adjusted on their calendars, and hopefully that works for people. Great. Well, that was an excellent discussion. I'm very excited about it. That opportunity for us to collaborate with them. And Don, I mean, you've done a lot of work already with them up there, and so thanks for forging that path. Any other updates on what's happening around the Horn?
I would just like to mention that we have a new representative from Cornell Cooperative Extension here today. Lindsay is here.
Hi, everybody.
Great.
Say
Hi,
hi.
Lindsay.
Hi, Lindsay.
Nice to meet everybody. If I don't know you already.
Yep, and I'll be inviting her to the meetings in the future. So
Great. Great to have you. Thank you for joining us. And we always reserve a spot if you would like to provide information updates or, solicit information from us during this meeting. So just let Don know ahead of time that you'd like to reserve some time.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us. Okay. I think it looks like Elizabeth.
Oh, no, I was saying goodbye.
Oh, I thought you were saying, whoop, hold on. Okay, great. All right. Well, happy holidays, everyone. And happy new year. And we'll see you all in the new year, if not sooner. Thanks so much.
Take care.
thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.